And welcome back. You know, interesting observation about Candid. So that was Bill Conrad, and he was a robust fellow. When I was a kid, that was called husky. When my mother would say, we're going to the husky section because there's just more of you to love, I know what she meant. But we couldn't use the word.
No.
We can't use the word today, but we had a husky as the word.
Well, they used to call them athletic cut for the suits.
For the Huskies?
Yes.
Whoa, that's way politically correct
And
because
now-
husky sort of makes sense.
They're calling them beefy.
Beefy?
Beefy. If
Okay.
you're a little bit beefy.
So the one thing I noticed, Cannon was a little husky.
He was well nourished.
He was, and his one thing, and Brent, I want to tell you, Danny's left the building. Like Elvis, he's gone. So the one thing that was very interesting about Cannon, and Bill Conrad, by the way, was an incredible producer.
Oh, yeah.
He was behind so many iconic shows in the 50s and the 60s. But at the end of every episode, he's always has to try some of his favorite restaurants, right? He always knows the chef in a restaurant that from some town that nobody ever heard.
Well, that's how they paid for the production of the show.
But the one thing, always, and you know, his criminals are always rice and run real fast. So they show the scene. The criminal bolts from the scene. He's 5 blocks, 10 blocks away. Cannon is like, and guess what? He catches up to her.
Of course. Because he's well nourished.
How does that happen? The magic of 1970s
That's right.
television can never be replaced. So, Danny's like,
Welcome back, Danny.
welcome back, Danny. Welcome back to financial
Oh, man, that was
fitness.
a good nap.
Right. Yeah. So, the scary part of retirement is, well, first of all, we have gotten all kinds of new pandemic information. The Employee Benefit Research Institute, which I follow, reported that in May that only 24% of retirement age Americans would be confident that they have enough money to retire comfortably. David Blanchett, actually using very conservative metrics, found that it was going to only be 18% of retirement age Americans that would be able to retire. And so you also now have to really consider holistically, where am I going to live in retirement? Because with Social Security, cost of living adjustments, where they are, Medicare premiums increasing, right? Possibly now that you're an accumulator, maybe you've gotten a pay cut or your employer's not going to match your contributions. My biggest fear for the overall global economy, and ours first, is, Danny, that we just are in a very low growth kind of situation for many years. And where do companies usually look to cut? They look to cut labor and pay and benefits, and those costs are going to continue to go higher. So you got to watch where you might have to make some big changes, right? You might have to pick up and move, be more transportable than you would be or mobile than you were. So WalletHub looked at, hey, where does your dollar go farther without sacrificing your lifestyle? And so it looked at 182 U.S. cities, 150 of the most populated ones, and it said it came up with a list. Now, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that probably a lot of them are in New York and New Jersey.
Where your money does not go as far.
Like Yonkers or Jersey City or Newark. Baltimore, Bridgeport, Connecticut. I will tell you, I love Connecticut, but I have been in Warwick, Rhode Island, also on the list. I remember in the 90s, Warwick, Rhode Island being on this list. It's still on this list. San Bernardino, California, Pearl City, Hawaii, Detroit, Wichita, Kansas. That was
I was shocked by that one.
That was an interesting one. And again, they look at affordability, healthcare, quality of life. So it looks like there are certain, cities. Listen, there are people that they'll eke out retirement in these cities because we are less mobile than we've ever been, Danny. We don't go anywhere. If you've lived in a rural area, and there are a lot of great books about the problems in rural areas with drugs, as companies move away and there are shells of businesses left. Now, I don't know what happens with the pandemic, Like, in other words, people are now moving into some of these more rural areas from the cities. So I don't know if that adds maybe some revival to some of these particular areas. But it's very important when we do planning, we want to know, where do you feel you're going to retire? Because we might have to adjust your inflation rates for just even your basic living expenses. And I've had clients, Danny, that moved back to different, I say, I'm moving back to LA, or I'm moving back to New York, or whatever it might be. And we have to, whoa. you were gonna stay in Texas, or you had, now you're changing the plan. So, it makes a very big impact. And I think it's even more of an impact now, post-pandemic, where you retire.
Yeah, I agree. And so, you have to take these things into account. And I think that's one of the things that, many people are getting better at thinking about. I hear a lot of people who are moving out of, we visit with people moving out of, far west, far east coast.
Yep.
New York, LA seems to be a common theme. Trying to get to a more tax-friendly environment, and a place that they're not going to be as burdened from a distribution standpoint. And I think it's a smart move. You don't hear too often the story like you just mentioned of people actually moving back. I think that's probably more an abnormality. But overall, these are things you must consider within the plan. I mean, we consider all these different variables. We look at, longevity. What's your life expectancy look like? What type of retirement are you likely going to have? Are you retiring in a headwind or a tailwind?
I mean, it's a shame almost that, it's great people are living longer, but their money is not going to last as long. So where you live makes a very big difference. How you live makes a very big difference. There is going to be, I know I shared this on Facebook yesterday from Think Advisor about how many people do not really think about long-term care, right?
Well, they don't.
And you figure out, oh my gosh, we call this the financial elephant room, right?
That's right.
If you can't handle activities of daily living, and in this study, it also indicated that which I found surprising, that even some of these older Americans didn't think they would have their caregivers as their children as caregivers. Nor did they want to be their burden, which I've written about many times. But heck, if you don't start preparing for this, so how seniors live, how housing is going to look in 10, 20 years is going to be totally different. You're going to have to cohabitate with or set up communities. And I wrote about this in my book in 2012 about these trailer park communities, and not the stereotypical what you're thinking. Very nice, sort of very affordable areas of, like in Florida and some other states, where people have communal kitchens, but they all take care of each other. They're very small, very well kept, trailer home type facilities, a park, a shared common space, gardens. We have to come up with some really revolutionary kinds of situations to help people with long-term care. And I also looked at a demographic that shockingly, I can't remember the number, but it was over 40% of seniors through their whole life are going to be single. It's not just say, okay, Danny passes away and Mrs. R is going to live longer. It's just that you start off being alone or single. Yeah. And which is even more of an issue or a drain on your finances. So, it's going to be, there are going to be some very creative solutions to how people live and maintain a quality of life. Well, there's going to have retirement.
It's going to have to be that shared commitment amongst other retirees, unfortunately, because, Transamerica Center for Retirement Studies did a new survey, and it stated that 48% of women and 56% of men actually have a very well thought out plan when it comes to long-term care, and it's their family and friends. That's a scary dynamic when you start to think about where, people's mindset is around this. And it's, people living paycheck to paycheck. Yep. Times are hard. You go through a handful of different recessions, and you're just not able to get to where you thought you were going to. And a lot of times,
go ahead.
It's consumerism.
Yeah.
Because we always think things are good. I love being an optimist, and I think that we all are here, but on the same...
Speak for yourself, buddy.
Yeah, well, same token.
No, you have to be. You really do. You have to be.
But you also have to be a pessimist when it comes to money. in a lot of ways.
You do.
So I think you need to share. You need to have a shared commitment here in this aspect that you need to think, okay, be optimistic on what the future holds and what you can do and provide. But you also need to think on the flip side of the what ifs to prepare you and your family. And unfortunately, we just didn't see that. And so now we have this issue where, this is an actual plan that half of retirees think that this is family and friends is a plan. That's a terrible plan.
And they haven't even talked to their friends and family about it. They just assume.
Oh, so as we age, I'm not going to get a bigger house. We're downsizing.
Of course.
You think my in-laws, my parents, you coming? You got nothing coming. Everybody got their own long-term care policy years ago.
The shed out in the yard.
I'm kidding, but
Kate thinks about this too. What is going to be the impact? Because obviously when you look at the deaths from COVID, they are clustered in assisted living, right? Nursing homes. Sort of intuitively makes sense. But we've also seen a drain on long-term care insurance and riders that provide benefits up front to life insurance and so forth. What kind of costs, for premiums are there going to be for long-term care? A lot, except for maybe the top 10% of wage earners. How are you going to afford it? And so picking where you're going to, or selecting where you're going to live is important. And healthcare obviously is very important on this overall list. Whew, we got a lot of stuff to talk about when we return, about jobless claims and so many other things. New book that I'm reading, going through some insights with you here on The Real Investment Show on 700 KCV, the voice of Texas.
The Real Investment Advice blog. It's required reading for the informed investor. Catch it today at realinvestmentadvice.com.